Hello Year 5, it is World Book Day today and we have got lots of exciting activities planned. If you are in teams at home, you need to get in front of you an extract of the text, Sky Steppers, don't worry it'll all become clear soon, and have a little look, get some of those activities open and ready to go. Okay, so the text we're going to look at today is from an author called Catherine Rundell, and it is an extract from a book called Sky Steppers, which is actually one of the books that you can purchase when you get your voucher when you are back in school. Okay, so I am going to read the text to you. You can read along at home, or if you're in school, you can just read that yourself and skip these few slides of me reading it. So first of all, let's have a little look at the blurb. It says, go on an adventure with Catherine Rundell. High above the streets of Paris live the roof-toppers, a secret gang of children who eat, sleep and tumble amongst the chimney pots. But for Matteo and Mercedes, the adventure is only just beginning. The pair find themselves on a wild hunt across Paris, tearing over the roofs in search of hidden treasure in a race against an enemy who could seek to destroy that which they love best. Okay, before we dive into reading the text, we've got an activity. This is activity 1. So if you were to go on an exciting and wild adventure, where would you go? Maybe your place is made up, or maybe it's a real location like the rooftops of Paris. Draw an outline of a suitcase and pack all the things you might need in your new wild place. What sort of dangers would you need to prepare? So on this slide here, I have added some pictures of some places if you're struggling to think of places. So we've got Antarctica, the pyramids of Giza, a rainforest, Everest, and the rooftops of London. What dangers can you spot? What clothes would you need? What equipment would you need? What would you be looking for when you were there? What would you be going to do? So pause the video, go and do activity 1. Once you've finished activity 1, have a little break, then come back and we'll continue. Vocabulary. Okay, whilst we are reading through, we are going to look for these 6 words here. These are just some words that I thought you might struggle with what they mean. So we've got probabilities, memorized, insufficiently earnest, parapet, past judgment, and unfamiliar. You might know some of the words already. If we think about this word probabilities, it comes from the root word probability, the chances of something happening. I wonder if anybody can think of the root word for memorized. And here we've got a prefix un in front of the root word familiar. Okay, so I think you probably might know those 3. The others maybe not. So if you are at home, you can open up the PDF of the text and read along with me. If you're in school, you can pause the video and read it with your class teacher, or people can take turns in class reading. Or you can keep the video on and you can hear me read. I did record this already and I pressed the video screen so that you could see me and we could have a little bit more interaction, but it didn't work, guys. So I'm having to record it again. All right, so let's begin. Chapter 1. It was the evening of Matteo's 11th birthday and he was stealing a cucumber. There were many ways in which it could have been fine, the only one in which it could have been a disaster. Unfortunately, as Matteo found out, probabilities don't always play nice. He had done it many times before. If the woman behind whom he was hiding had not moved, if the 2 policemen had not been bored and looking for something to do, everything for the rest of his life might have been different. Instead, the woman twisted to pick up a cabbage. One of the policemen gave a sudden roar, and Matteo and the cucumber took off through the lamplit streets of Paris. He was fast, and he knew how to move through a crowd. He dodged in front of one carriage, behind another, around a man on a bicycle who yelled something which Matteo might, in less urgent moments, have carefully memorized for later use. He ducked under the belly of a vast horse. For a second he thought about swinging up onto it and away, but the horse was attached to the rubbish cart and it seemed impractical. So just reading some of those clues, looking for clues. Remember, good readers always look for clues in the text. I'm thinking that this is not set in modern times. I wonder if you can think of some of the clues that are in there. So we've got a carriage, we've got street lamps rather than lights. We've got horses on the street. It makes me think that this is not in modern times. I'm also thinking about the character Matteo. Why is he stealing a cucumber on his birthday? We've already talked about that he might be alone or he hasn't got family or friends around him. Stop him! Stop that boy! The policemen were gaining on him. Matteo sprinted down the boulevard, holding the cucumber out in front of him like a dagger, and veered into a street called the Rue Gluck. The great Paris Opera was nearby, and that always attracted crowds. Crowds, perhaps, that he could hide in. A group of Belgian tourists, clad in rigorously serious shoes, stood looking up at the great wedding cake of a building. So on this slide here, boys and girls, I've put a picture of the opera house, just so you can really imagine it when we hear about it in the text here. He tried to merge into them, but there were no other children. Besides, Matteo felt his shoes looked insufficiently earnest. So the shoes of the Belgian tourists were serious looking, and his were insufficiently earnest, so insufficiently serious enough. And at the end of the road there was another policeman, a lithe, sport-looking man, fishing something out from between his teeth with the end of his penknife. "No need to run," called one policeman. "He can't escape." The lithe officer stopped working on his teeth and came striding down the street. There was no way out. It took Matteo less than a second to decide. If there was no way out, he would go up. The opera house might have been built to be climbed. Matteo had always felt rather scornful about the pillars and the carved figures and golden faces that adorned its sides. The designer of the building, he thought, must have had an addiction to winged nymphs. But they made it the perfect climbing wall. He edged round the side, reached out and grasped the drain pipe. He yanked off his boots, shoved one in each pocket, set his toes behind the pipe, put the cucumber between his teeth, braced against the wall and pushed himself upwards. The pipe was exactly the right size for his two hands to wrap around. Clammy and breathless and shaking, he climbed. Once he was high enough, he stretched sideways and transferred his weight to one of the carved angels. His palms were sweaty with fear. He tried to wipe one on his hair, but his hair is no good for wiping. One hand on a goddess's foot, one in the mouth of a golden man. Pull! Breathe! Someone gave a shout below, but he did not look down until he was within reach of the top. The top of the building was a great copper dome, turned green with age, and on the centre of the dome stood a bronze statue of the Greek god Apollo. Matteo crouched behind the parapet. So that's the edge of the building there, right? That gold part that you can see there. Looking up at Apollo's behind, over which the sculptor had clearly taken considerable time and tried to get his breath back. He could hear the policemen calling to each other down below. "Where'd he go? What happened?" The man took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "He went up." "You're seeing things, Jean-Luc. It's getting dark." "I swear he went up the statues. He put his foot in the mouth of the angel of lyric drama. I saw it." The lithe policeman grunted. "I don't fancy trying to explain that to the captain. I'm telling you. Think of the paperwork." "Ah, let's leave it," said the older man. He was just a nuisance. It seemed impossibly good luck for someone whose luck had never run particularly lucky. Good enough to make up for the bad luck of being chased. There they were, walking away. Matteo dusted down his hands and adjusted his claws, sucked the blood off his arm where it had dragged against the brickwork, and stood up. He leaned over the gold-rimmed parapet and took in his surroundings. It was a dizzying feeling. Matteo had climbed many trees before, but never a rooftop. His whole body was stuttering. The chase, he realized, had eaten him up. Fear is exhausting, and even though he would not have admitted it to himself, he had been afraid. Matteo had no family, which meant he had nobody who would help him if he were caught. He walked the whole surface of the roof. It was not, he thought, so bad up here. It was quieter, more private. The people in the street below all watched each other and passed judgment, even if just very fleetingly, on each other's everything: shoes, clothes, face, walk, money, power. Up here, nobody could see him. Up here, nobody could chase him. He looked out over Paris. The lights flickering on made it look unfamiliar and alive. He had been born in Paris, at least he supposed he had, and knew, as all Parisians do, that it was the greatest place on earth. Yet he had never really looked at it before now. Its streets twisted and wound round churches and great hotels and tiny cafes, and through it all the river Seine turning midnight blue as the summer evening fell. Beneath his feet the orchestra struck up, and the opera began vibrating through his shoes and all the way into his lungs. The music made him feel reckless. In the dark he climbed up onto the ledge of the parapet and stood right at the edge, with his toes curled over the drop into nothing. He felt his stomach swoop into an entire cycle up his body. It was in his feet, skull, knees, chest. At one point it felt like he was possibly in his ears. It was terrifying and electric. He should really, he thought, go back down. But up here it was like nothing else he'd ever felt. It was like being drunk on air. Up here, high above the streets and the world that walks in them, even a child with a hole in his shoe could feel like a king. It was the perfect place for a birthday feast. He stuck a lit match into the cucumber in place of a candle and sang very softly, "Happy birthday to me," and he decided to stay. If you are in school, I would like you to finish reading the rest of the extract in pairs or independently on your own. And if you are at home, just read it on your own. Then come back to the video. Again, have a little break, stretch your feet, go and get a drink, have a little break, come back and we'll discuss these questions here. So the first one, what strikes you about the first sentence of the story? What does it tell you about Matteo? So here's the first sentence. It was the evening of Matteo's 11th birthday and he was stealing a cucumber. So it actually makes you almost laugh a little bit. But as you think deeper a little bit about it, it makes me think that Matteo is alone. Okay, it doesn't sound like your normal regular birthday with friends and families around you and presents. Second question, what image do you get of Paris on page 2? Write down words or phrases that stand out. So get your pen and paper ready and write down some words or phrases that stand out about Paris itself. So just start reading through. He ducked under the belly of a horse, so he's having to move around. It's quite busy. Stop him, the policeman. Matteo sprinted down the boulevard, holding the cucumber out in front of him like a dagger. So there's always crowds of people. There were no children, there were no other children there, so there was just adults. Lots and lots of adults cramped together, very busy. Okay, and he's having to run and dart and sprint through people and duck and dive everywhere. It gives the impression that it's a very, very busy place. Question 3. How does Catherine Rundell contrast the setting of the rooftops on page 5? So when we think about this word contrast, it wants us to compare, in this instance, two settings. So we've got the busy French Parisian street down below, but what is it like up above on the rooftops? How do they contrast? How do they compare? So he walked the whole surface, not what he thought. So bad up here. It was quieter, more private. The people in the street below watched each other and passed judgment, even if just fleetingly. So down below, the Parisians down below were passing judgment. Oh, they're nice shoes. Oh, they're horrible. Judging people. But up here, nobody could be seen. So there was nobody to pass that judgment. So he feels a little bit more free up there. The lights flickering on made it unfamiliar and alive. So even though he's lived in Paris most of his life, it tells us that he was born there. This new place seems alive. So the contrast there is that busy street where people are passing judgment all the time. not being very nice to one another. And then up on the rooftops, there's nobody there to judge. It's a lot quieter and peaceful, private. Okay, so your first activity was to complete the suitcase about what you would take if you were going to a dangerous place. And this is a second task. But first of all, you need to watch the video by Catherine Rundell. Okay, so it's either a link on the PowerPoint, or if you are watching the video on YouTube, the link will be in the description. So it's really important that you watch this. I suggest after you've watched the video, you have a bit of a break because you've already done one task. We've read a whole extract. I would have yourself a bit of a break. Okay. So hopefully you've watched the video, you've had a break, you've had a stretch, you've had a snack. You are feeling ready for the next part. So inspiration 1, high stories inspired by real life. In the video, Catherine talks about taking inspiration from real life exciting incidents that put people at the very edge of themselves, in danger, relying on the hidden parts of themselves. Catherine talks about a man called Philippe Pipet tightroping between the two towers of Notre Dame in 1971. What sort of qualities do you think you need to be able to do something like that? What hidden parts of yourself would you have to find? What are your hidden parts? Write them down. So search for an image of Philippe Pipet, I put one here on the right, completing his stunt in 1971. Use the image to create a description of a dangerous act high up in the sky. How can you create the sense of danger and tension in your writing? Challenge yourself to write something quickly in 15 minutes. So set a timer on your phone, set a timer in class, and you're going to write about a dangerous event. It might be this one, it could be climbing Everest, it could be sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, these are actually things that people have done. Okay, on here I've just added a way that you could build up tension. One that really struck me was using your senses. So if you're describing Philippe Pipet doing this stunt, what would he be able to see, hear, smell, taste? Okay, thinking about what he would be feeling at the time as well. What would be happening to his body, his heart? Would he be sweating? Would he be calm? What about if he loses his balance suddenly? Could you include that into your writing? Okay, this is your third activity, which it says about look up, creating sky scenes. Catherine talks about how we always forget to look up. She describes her own adventures on rooftops in Oxford, finding mysterious items and imagining people who live above. Take a moment during your day to look up. Maybe you can see lots of tall buildings, or perhaps just a few chimneys. Maybe you can see birds and trees. At night time, maybe you can see the moon and the stars. Draw a sketch of what you see when you look up. Once you have created your sketch, populate, that means add in, your own scene with new details from your own imagination. For example, you could add a mystery item or object, or you might want to add a character or two. Use your sky scenes to inspire your ideas for an adventure, just like Catherine's Sky Steppers. So get out of the house, go and have a little look up. Maybe have a walk up the street with your adult at home, or if you're in school, go and look up out onto the yard and around all of the woodland areas that we have. What can you see? If you look into the distance as well, I know we've got some brilliant views from our school. Have a look and draw what you see, and then add in some of your own little extras. So just to recap, there are 3 activities throughout the course of today, as well as making or drawing your scarecrow. Okay, so activity 1 was the suitcase, then writing your own story about a dangerous stunt, and then drawing something that you see up above you. Okay, hope you've enjoyed these activities, boys and girls, and I look forward to seeing them.